è una cosa che viene domani, dopodomani, dopodomani. Il futuro è una cosa che arriverà.
Quello che ci sarà domani.
Tutto ciò che deve ancora accadere.
Cosa c'è domani?
È come il passato, ma è diverso. Che dai una cosa e poi quello che ha dato lo dà un'altra e fa così.
La mamma e il papà sono una generazione e io e mia sorella siamo un'altra generazione.
Che tutti siamo uguali. Papi, queste sono domande importanti. Devo cercare di dire delle cose importanti.
Good morning everyone, and welcome to this second day of Made in Steel, the conference and exhibition dedicated to the steel industry. Yesterday, during the opening ceremony, we have spoken about the keyword of our future. We underlined words such as geopolitics, Europe, future, trust, people and talent. So we are really glad today to have here and to guest here in Made in Steel Mr. Yuri Riznikov, CEO of Metinvest. We are really glad to answer his vision about Europe, about future, because there are actually the key words to build the new world of our chain, but not only, the new world of our Europe. Thank you very much to everyone. I invite Emanuele to reach me on the floor and enjoy this conference from Cedarweb and Made in Steel staff, and enjoy Mr. Riznikov vision. Thank you.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Yes. So thank you very much to Francesca for the introduction, and thank you all for being here. The conference is also streamed in both English and Italian, so we have also people listening in from abroad. As Francesca said yesterday, Made in Steel started with a number of interesting presentations on this podium. The whole afternoon was dedicated to the role of Europe in the steel market. Today, together with Made in Steel, we decided to invite a special guest on this podium, who's the CEO of Metinvest Group, the largest Ukrainian steelmaker, Mr. Yuri Ryzenkov. And the reason to invite him is because we talked about Europe. Ukraine is geographically and geopolitically part of Europe, very close to our to what we do every day with our steel industry in Europe, and we thought it was going to be a very interesting opportunity to hear from him after a very difficult 2022, we all know that, but also to hear about future projects and the big projects that Metinvest Group has to continue be a key player in the global steel market. So first of all, I would like you to give an applause to Mr. Ryzenkov for joining us. I would like you to join us on the podium. Most of you know him already, of course. Mr. Ryzenkov has had over 25 years of experience in the steel industry. If you want to take a seat, we'll now have a more informal chat. Now I'm just going to stand for 2 minutes, and then we're going to have a very informal one. He's been in the steel industry for over 25 years. He actually studied in London, if I'm not wrong, and he held previously leadership role in ISTIL, a Ukrainian steel manufacturer and private equity firm, as well as DTEK, Ukraine's largest private investor in the energy industry. He joined then Metinvest in 2013 and now holds the role of CEO of the group. So to start with, we have around an hour to discuss. I have prepared a set of questions. Of course, we will probably go out of the set of questions and discuss a little bit what is happening. But really, I mean, to start with, you all know what Metinvest is. A global player with a central presence, of course, in Ukraine, but a very important role in Europe as well, through Italy, Bulgaria, UK, and a presence in the US, if I'm not wrong. The first question is really to understand a little bit the vision of the group. How important was the international role that Metinvest had from Ukraine into the world during the last decade?
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Metinvest started as a Ukrainian steel producer quite some time ago, almost 17 years. But Ukrainian steel market was already shrinking after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and so naturally Metinvest was looking for outside opportunities. And we started with supply of steel products and iron ore products, mainly to the European market, but also to the other markets in the world. And finally, about 15 years ago, we realized that to serve European market, you have to be close to your European customers, and you have to hear them, you have to react to their wishes, you have to predict their wishes, and so you have to become local. And that's the time when we entered the Italian market with the purchase of Trametal,
Yes.
Malacalza Cameli, and since then we've been a player in the Italian steel industry, basically producing semi-finished products in Ukraine, but then rolling them into finished products here in Italy and serving many of our clients, primarily in northern Italy and southern Germany.
So the Italian market has always had a central role in your international view, correct?
It has been, and it remains to be probably the largest market. I wanted to say the second largest after Ukraine, but if you look at the volumes, probably now the Italian market is even bigger than Ukrainian market for Metinvest.
And then you also expanded in the US, is that correct?
US, it's more strengthening our integration, vertical integration. So we purchased coal mines in the United States to supply coking coal to our facilities in Ukraine.
I mean, we all know, I want to start with looking back, looking at what was your experience during the last decade. You've been in the group for 10 years, more or less now. So what was your experience in the last decade? And we cannot, of course, not comment on what happened almost a year ago in March, end of February 2022. Of course, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia changed everything, changed also the organization and the vision of Metinvest. But first of all, I would like to know, what happened? And most importantly, when we were discussing earlier, how important was the experience of 2014, 2015, when something not to that scale, but similar already happened, to be, how would you say you were ready for such a thing?
It's interesting concept that you asked. For Ukrainians, the war actually started in 2014. So we consider last year is pretty much as an escalation of already ongoing war. Of course, what the experience that we gained in 2014, 2015, 2016 played a crucial role in getting through the hardest time last year. When the first conflict started, when the war started in 2014, we already seen distortion of supply chains. We already seen destruction of our facilities, sometimes basically taking over our facilities by armed people, so on and so forth. So at that time, we realized how flexible we should be, how we should diversify our supply chain, how we should diversify our logistical chains. So when the full-scale invasion happened last year, I wouldn't say we were ready. Nobody can be ready for that. But we knew what to do first, and we didn't waste basically a day. We rebuilt our logistical chains. We introduced new sources of raw materials. For example, our Italian facilities, they switched to standalone mode of production.
Okay.
They had the difficulties at first. In the first few months, we even had to stop for a month or two.
When you say standalone, you mean supplying feedstock from the open market?
Basically, yeah, they lost the main supplier. The main supplier for Italian facilities was Azovstal. And they had to rebuild the whole supply chain for themselves. So they had to go to the open market, they had to go to Far East, they had to go to Brazil, to the local manufacturers like ADI, or to the German and British manufacturers, and source their semi-finished goods locally and start to produce as a profit center. And it was a challenge which they took, and they were successful in that.
Of course. So definitely a challenging year. You said no one can be ready for such a thing, for a full-scale invasion of your country by another military army. But 1 year later, would you say that the preparation that you had in a way was successful? Was one of the reasons why you were successful in reorganizing the structure so quickly? Because today we see your presence here at Made in Steel. Metinvest remains a strong player in the international market, and it can be considered also, looking back 12 months, a big success.
There were a few things that made us ready. One is that since 2014, we took very seriously the safety of our facilities and the safety of our employees, especially during the armed fighting, basically, nearby. So we kept the bomb shelters, we kept special procedures, what to do for the employees when the shelling happening and so on and so forth. So that all helped a lot in early days of March last year to stay more or less calm and with a clear mind for our employees as well, what to do. So they knew how to stay safe, and they knew what they had to do at the facilities when something like that was happening. So that first thing that helped us to save many lives of our people. And at the same time, the equipment, the facilities, obviously we lost what was in Mariupol, but the remaining facilities made pretty much intact. Second is the diversification of our supplies. We were quickly able to switch to other sources of coal, to other sources of limestone, which are needed for production. So that was also helped us to keep production going, even when the fighting was literally like 30 kilometers away from the facilities. And finally, the logistics. We changed the whole logistical chain. Traditionally, we were supplying our products through Black Sea and Azov Sea ports to the Mediterranean and Black Sea region. As the Russians blocked Ukrainian ports, we had to reroute all the goods via the land routes to Europe.
Yes.
That is still a challenge. That was a very big challenge in the beginning of this invasion in March last year, in April last year, and especially actually for the European operators. It turned out that Ukrainian railways were more ready to take up the volumes than the Europeans, because they were not used to it. They simply were not used to it. But since then, we've done a very good job with our European logistics operators, debottleneck many of railway routes, also worked with the Baltic ports and the Black Sea, Romanian, Constanța port. For the Baltic ports, again, as they were not used to such large volume of materials hauling, we had to provide them some help, even delivering some, for example, cranes from Nikolaev in Ukraine at the time it was shelled to the Baltic ports in Poland to debottleneck their
Yes.
facilities. So I think those three areas which we undertook at the beginning of invasion, we managed to do a good job, and that kept the company going.
Yeah, and we'll discuss later the future, so actually what the plans are. But I'm very interested in the reorganization of logistics, which must have been one of the biggest challenges. I mean, for your presence, the Black Sea was crucial, was vital, of course, was key for your presence, but also for the European and Turkish market and all the markets supplying there. So one very quick question, then we'll come back to this later. But given the reorganization that you put down and now the new experience with rail traffics and things like this, do you think the new solution could be used also in the future, so it could become more of an hybrid system, or eventually the Black Sea remains the real door to the international market?
Well, the Black Sea is an ideal door to the external markets. Whatever we do to seaborne transportation is still the cheapest way of transportation for the bulk materials, and steel and iron ore products are still bulk materials. But at the same time, the way we debottlenecked supplies, landline supplies to Europe, that will prove very useful when we come to the next stage of European green steel transformation.
Yeah.
Because for that matter, Ukraine is a very good source of supplies of DRI and HBI products, potentially, that are so much needed for the European green steel transformation. And the fact that we developed those logistical routes, especially for the Eastern Europe, especially for the Central Germany, that will be very beneficial in the future once Metinvest or other steel makers in Ukraine start producing DRI and HBI products.
Absolutely, yeah. And as I said, we'll come back a little bit later to the future. But one other question on the year that just finished. I mean, an exceptional year, of course. Nobody could have been prepared to what happened in February, March 2022. But at the end of the year, you managed financially to still have a year in green. I mean, a positive year, let's say, financially. The real question is, how did you achieve that? I mean, is this actually a result of the results of 2021, or was there really a good part of good management in 2022?
Well, 2021 definitely provided a good cushion. That was probably best year in history for most of the steel makers in the world. So yes, they provided us with a healthy balance sheet with which we came into 2022. But apart from that, the fact that the group was diversified, we had our European operations, we had our US operations, that also provided us with the strengths needed to generate the results. And finally, again, coming back to the fact that we restructured our logistics, we managed to keep the assets which were outside the fighting zones. We managed to keep them intact. We managed to keep them operational. That gave us this inflow that generated the results in green.
So you mentioned 2021 as an exceptional year for the steel industry globally. We all remember it. Unfortunately, it's long past. We are not there anymore. So I would like to pull up my presentation, please, on the screen. So I only put together 2 slides. You can see it there as well. Just because I wanted to discuss with you, where are we in the steel market at the moment? I mean, we all know that China is the leading force in the market. You see here some of the numbers related to China. This year, at the moment, China is still sort of sending mixed signals to the market. We expect a recovery for the full year compared to last year in terms of demand and production as well. But at the same time, the ups and downs in the sentiment in China are impacting the market. So the same goes for Europe. We came out of an amazing 2021. 2022 saw a clear correction, also due to the geopolitical situation and the impact. 2023 is still not yet the year of full recovery. This will probably, according to Eurofair number, happen in 2024. But if we look at even with prices, you see the big volatility of iron ore, but this year has been so far characterized, the first part of this year characterized by a correction in iron ore price. It has come down back to the level of $100, $105, depending. Actually, in the last 2 days, there was a small recovery, which is a good sign in China, but it has come down, but it still remains at a level that it's relatively elevated anyway, far from the high levels we've seen in 2021 and 2022, but relatively elevated. Coking coal had a very strong rally last year, and now it has corrected. Again, in this case, the correction is probably natural because the peak reached was almost unsustainable. But the interesting thing is that, and scrap, of course, here you have a chart of scrap, which is moving in the same direction, again, at a level quite elevated compared to the pre-COVID level, but this is due to the fact that scrap usage, scrap demand is increasing, we all know, linked to decarbonization and many other reasons. But the beginning of this year were a few months of decline in prices. Here, just to give an idea, I've put HRC prices because we are in a moment in which, if we look east, Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, India, prices are clearly moving down. In Europe, the situation has stabilized after a recovery, maybe not the recovery that steelmakers were expecting, but definitely a recovery. As usual in the US, we have a market that has their own movement. Now the spread between the US and China is incredible. This means, of course, the big question is, does the Western world, in a way, Europe and the US, need to correct their prices, or Asia will see a recovery? I end up my presentation actually with this photo from the bridge in Genova that was built using big volumes of Metinvest steel, so this is important. But let's go back on the market. Again, you mentioned 2021, exceptional year for everyone. The reality is it was an exceptional year not only for steelmakers, but for all the supply chain. Where are we now? I mean, what is the uncertainty after maybe the most uncertain year, 2022, geopolitically, after a few decades?
Well, if you look straight at 2022 prices for steel and the iron ore without looking at all the rest, you would probably say it should have been a very good year for the steel producers. Even today, with $100 per ton of iron ore, only 5 years earlier, we would have been very happy with this price. The problem that came in 2022 was really the energy crisis rather than anything else. So the inputs, the cost of energy that goes into production of steel and steel products really just consume all the margins there, and steel makers were not able to offer steel to their customers at the prices that would justify an improvement in production levels. And that was in 2022. Since then, we've seen the new movements in the energy. We've seen some LNG terminals set up around Europe, which stabilize gas prices in Europe. And I would imagine the gas prices would go even lower than it is today. Also, the electricity prices have been stabilized since 2022. And that led to improvements in European steelmaking at the beginning of this year. Coupled with the destocking that happened at the end of last year. So obviously, first quarter, everybody started to restock, and that gave some optimism to most of the European producers. Unfortunately, I don't think it will last for too long. We are still too dependent on the rest of the world, and you're right saying that Chinese prices are still declining. Chinese and Far Eastern prices are still declining. And the forecast for Chinese economy is not too exciting this year. We're talking at 2.3% growth forecast, which for China is almost a decline. Of course, we're being held by India's 7% growth forecast, or other Asia like 3 to 6%. But still, the world economy is in very weak position at the moment, and it's still not clear that it will rebound towards mid or end of this year.
Yeah.
We believe similarly that the rebound is more plausible in 2024. And especially in Europe, where, yes, it's post-COVID, post-energy crisis. There should be growth in automotive, there should be growth in construction, but it has inertia. It takes time.
Yes.
And we believe that 2023 will be the year of inertia, when the European economy and the Far Eastern economies will reignite, and then we can see stronger numbers in 2024.
Yeah, you mentioned Europe and the challenges of energy prices it faced last year. Yesterday from this podium, we heard CEOs and president of companies mentioning the fact that, first of all, we were not ready, Italy in particular, but Europe overall was not ready, or maybe, never thought about something like this happening. But yeah, you said 2023 should be a year of stabilization, the end of the reorganization in a way. But do you think Europe going forward, despite the challenges it has linked to energy in particular, it will still play a key role in the steel market, or it needs to adapt to the fact that it's going to struggle, especially due to the fact that also for the future of the steel that we want, decarbonized, green steel, we need new sources of energy, and we need green sources of energy that at the moment we are behind, of course. We are not ready for in Europe at least.
Well, I wouldn't say that Europe is behind. If you look at the decarbonization movement, then probably Europe is the fourth post for the decarbonization. You have a large share of EAF-produced steel in Europe. When you couple that with green energy, you will have a much greener steel than most parts of the world. And most of the steel makers in Europe, if not all of them, they have plans to decarbonize, to move towards green steel, not excluding Metinvest, in fact. But at the same time, we need to see that consumer is ready to pay the price of decarbonization. Because that's actually is a big question, whether the consumer would be happy to pay, for example, more for a German car versus Japanese, just because the German car is decarbonized, or the Italian car for that matter.
And what is your view? I mean, this is the question that I ask to all steel makers. When we think about the premium that there will need to be paid for steel, then of course it's going to feed into cars and washing machines, but for steel, are your clients, let's not talk about end consumers, that's a big question. But your clients at the moment, do you think they would be ready to pay that premium because they believe that at the end of the cycle there will be more demand for this green steel? Is the market ready?
The market is not uniform in this respect. So we do have the clients that specifically require us today to produce green products, to produce decarbonized products. At the same time, we do have the clients everywhere in the world, Italy is not excluded, who would be going after price, and they don't care. So I think it's a progression in which will all take place. 10, 15 years ago, most of the steel producers would not even say anything about a green steel and would be very much against even a green energy, saying that it's just a waste of money because in most countries the cost of green energy was pushed onto the industrial companies, including steel producers. But they progressed. Over the last 15 years, the progress was phenomenal. Now you wouldn't probably find a steel maker in a civilized world who would not be thinking at least about a green steel, if not doing already something. And same happens to our customers, same happens to the consumers, and sometimes even quicker.
Yeah.
Sometimes they went quicker, and they will pull us towards the green steel future. So, in my opinion, green steel is the way to go. Is the way to go for steel. That will make steel products more competitive in the future, even when you compare it to the other products that are competing with steel, like aluminium or like plastics. If you can make steel cleaner than those products, you again gain an advantage over them.
And what role will Metinvest play in this? I mean, yesterday, you were not here, but Mr. Benedetti from Danieli mentioned a very interesting project. Now, his view of Ukraine becoming a big supplier of DRI for Europe through the fact that it has a strong supply of nuclear energy that can be used, correct me if I'm wrong, that can be used to make green hydrogen and so forth. So this, of course, is an amazing view. But what will be the role of Metinvest and, of course, Ukraine in this decarbonization of the steel industry? Is there really a possibility of Metinvest becoming a key supplier of DRI in this sense, or other green steel feedstocks for Europe?
Well, we'll love to share that vision with Mr. Benedetti. Metinvest is the largest producer of iron ore in Ukraine, and Ukraine is the largest producer of iron ore and iron ore products in Europe already. And the big advantage is that the iron ore which is being produced in Ukraine is a magnetite iron ore, which can be enriched to DRI qualities, to HBI qualities with already well-known technologies. All you need for that is an energy, nothing else. And again, if you look at the energy mix of Ukraine, it's very decarbonized now. We have like 65% of nuclear. We have about 10 to 15% of green renewables. We have 10% of hydro. So you have a very, very big chunk of energy mix already decarbonized. And the idea of Ukrainian government for the strategy for rebuilding Ukraine, actually this was mentioned a few weeks ago in a conference in Rome. Yes. on rebuilding Ukraine, is to continue to develop decarbonized energy sources. Obviously it's renewables, but also nuclear. And in that there is an idea which is both in Metinvest long-term strategy, which has been actually prior to the invasion, and now it's only strengthened. This idea is to build DRI facilities, enrichment facilities, production of DRI pellets, perhaps even HBI production in our facilities in Ukraine with a view to supply to European consumers. And that, in my view, should become an integral part of rebuilding Ukraine.
Yes.
That's a part of bringing Ukraine into the European Union. So you're at the same time rebuilding the country, but making it part of an overall EU product chain in this green steel movements. And I was actually happy to notice that it is being shared by the Ukrainian politicians, the Italian politicians, yes, and equipment manufacturers alike.
Well, and you mentioned the European Union. Yesterday, we talked a lot about the European Union. A very quick question. How important is for Ukraine to become even more part of the European community? And how important was, for example, after the invasion of Russia, the elimination of every tariffs and, opening the free market to Ukraine for the first time, actually, fully. How important is this in the future? Do you believe that a free market zone with Ukraine is the way forward?
I don't really see any other way for Ukraine. That's the only way for Ukraine. If Ukraine wants to develop its industry, its economy in a sustainable way, it needs the European market. And that was pretty clear for the last 10, 15 years. Unfortunately, we have been going back and forth in this process of coming into the European Union. Unfortunately, it was the invasion, but fortunately, exactly, it does help.
Yeah.
And this movement is, in my view, now almost inevitable. And the fact that many all their industries were damaged in Ukraine and will now have to be rebuilt. That also helped, because they will be rebuilt, they will be restored in view of Ukraine being integral part of the European Union. So you can specialize and localize with the understanding of the structure of those industries in the European Union, which was not present before. That includes the steel industry, for example.
So it opens up, I mean, in the tragedy, it opens up an opportunity for a new view, for a view that looks also at this as a new opportunity.
Absolutely.
Before we go on, we have a video from Metinvest, actually, that introduces a little bit also the role also of reconstruction, which we will be talking about in a moment. So I will ask them to pull it up for us. Well, first of all, thank you for the video, because it has really all the elements that we want to touch on, no? That we're trying to touch on this morning with you here. Again, thank you for being Milan. I hope you also enjoy your time in Milan, which as a Milanese, I can tell you is a nice city. Not when it's raining like yesterday night, but today hopefully it should be better. So let's move on and touch on Ukraine. So a very direct question now is, what is the status of Metinvest operation in Ukraine at the moment? And what are the plans for rebuilding, reorganizing, the continuation of the reorganization? Of course, many people ask the question, will there be a return at Azovstal? But what is the view to reorganize production and continue to increasing output at the moment in Ukraine?
With the logistical constraints that we're still at the moment, we cannot operate fully to 100% capacity, even with the assets that remain on Ukraine controlled territory. So we're in steelmaking, we're operating at about 60 to 70% capacity at the two remaining steel mills which we operate in Ukraine, which is in Zaporozhye and in Kamenskoye. Iron ore facilities, they're operating at about 35 to 45% capacity utilization, and the coking coal production is almost at 100%. Fortunately, we were able to become a good supplier of coking coal to the Eastern European manufacturers, and that helped us to keep those operations fully employed. Now, as I said, it's limited by the logistics and it's limited by the demand in the markets where we're able to serve our products to. But in the future, there are a few things that we're looking forward to developing. First, item that is on our agenda and that hasn't changed since invasion, and which we are actually continuing to pursue even as we speak, is this production of DRI and HBI grade products at our iron ore mining facilities, because we think that those projects, they're essential for the green steel transition, both in Ukraine, in Europe, and they make sense in any case with any configuration that we may come out with at the end of the war. Now, when it comes to the question about Azovstal, our shareholder Rinat Akhmedov, he mentioned already several times that he will not spare any efforts to rebuild Ukraine, to rebuild Mariupol, and rebuild Azovstal. But mind you, though, it will not be the same Azovstal, definitely.
Of course.
We had a vision for Azovstal actually prior to the invasion. It was supposed to become a DRI-based, EAF-based green steel mill.
Wow.
And Azovstal, the old Azovstal, was supposed to be demolished in 2035. So unfortunately, the demolition already happened, but we still have a chance to build a new Azovstal and to keep the heritage, and that's what we're looking at.
And restart, then also the view continues to have Mariupol as a hub, as a port hub also in the future to restart supplying the international market.
Yes, absolutely. We were in a very close contact with the Mariupol authorities, which evacuated from the city. And now they're developing the plan for the Mariupol to be rebuilt after the liberation. The program is called Mariupol Reborn, and we are the main sponsor right now of this initiative. We provided 60 million hryvnias, which is 1.5 million euros, for the studies which are necessary to be done, for the design works which are necessary to be done before the city is being rebuilt. And the key question there is what would be at the heart of Mariupol economy. What sectors are to be developed there? Obviously, steel sector will be there, but
Yeah.
I hope that in the future Mariupol, that's not going to be the only sector. So we need to develop a balanced model for the city, and that's what we're trying to do. And as this balanced economy is developed, we will know what the place of Metinvest there is and what the new Azovstal will look like.
And you mentioned the challenge of the European operation. If we look in Italy, for example, your plate production had a big challenge to reorganize the supply, of course. This, I'm sure, happened to all of the other European operations. What is the situation now at the European operations? Are they back to full production mode? Have they managed to completely reorganize their supply chain?
They're completely reorganized their supply chain. They're completely operating at a standalone basis, and they're servicing their customers and operating at 100% capacity utilization. Obviously, the capacity may vary with the markets or the repair program, but other than that, they're pretty much out there in the market as a standalone rerollers.
Yeah. So future of Metinvest is definitely the rebuild of Ukraine with a new view, with some changes, which I think it's very interesting as a message. You know, the key is not to, we don't have to go back to what it was before. We can use this opportunity, even if it was a forced one and a very violent one, to also bring in a new vision for the steel industry in Ukraine. And you mentioned already that Europe will continue to play an important role. How do you see this role growing even further for the Metinvest Group in the next years as a client, of course, so with Metinvest as a supplier of raw materials and steel products, or as a center of new operations?
I think it's possible to increase Medinvest presence in Europe in all regards that you just mentioned. We continuously looking at opportunities in Europe, and since our purchase of our Italian mills and the UK mill and the Bulgarian one, we've been looking at the new opportunities for either buy new companies in Europe, which would strengthen our Ukrainian operation as well and would be an integral part of the chain. But also we're looking at the possibilities to build new facilities, greenfield, in Europe and specifically in Italy.
Okay, so Italy will continue to be central for sure to the Metinvest Group.
To us, it's as we said in the beginning, it's a home market. We had very good operations in Italy for the last 15 years. We had a very good team here in Italy who works with our customers. We know what our customers want, and we are looking forward to improving our value proposition to our customers by putting either new facilities here or developing ones in Ukraine or Eastern Europe.
Okay. We're approaching the end, but before finishing, as you know, the entire conference, the entire event is dedicated to a view of the future. We have tried to talk about it as much as possible. We mentioned green steel a lot, and I wanted to hear a little bit more on this, on your view for the future of Metinvest as a key player in decarbonization. You mentioned DRI, but this idea, of course, that was already present in the group to rebuild or transition, for example, the old Azovstal mill in a green steel mill. So two questions. First of all, I would imagine when you mentioned the possibility of a greenfield project in Europe, it would be completely with a view to produce steel that is decarbonized, also to meet the European criteria, correct?
Any new projects that Metinvest is considering, they're all focused on producing green steel. So it's either direct transition to green steel or the few steps towards it. Like, for example, the projects that we're looking at in Kryvyi Rih, where we're mining our iron ore. It's a flotation project for our northern GOG to increase the ferrum content in the pellets. Mm-hmm. That's the first step to the DRI. So that's the first step to green steel production. Similarly, when we look at the new investments, for example, here in Italy, we are definitely looking at the latest and greatest technology. So that has to be green steel ready solutions. It may not be, for example, hydrogen powered or renewable powered from the first day, but it definitely will have all the necessary features to become carbon neutral production in the future.
I mean, in the past, Ukraine and the area of the Black Sea has been a big supplier of low cost, let's say, high volume steel through the Black Sea, of course, through Ukraine, through Russia and so forth. And it has been a very important partner, commercial partner for Italy and for Europe because of this. Do you see the future becoming of Ukraine, for example, becoming a partner in the next step, which is supply possibly at competitive costs, DRI or metallics or raw materials, or even steel in forms of slabs or semi-finished products that are already decarbonized and therefore feed into the new production system?
Ukraine is by definition the closest supplier of iron ore or steel products to most European countries. And once the Black Sea ports are reopened, that will be the most natural supplier to Italy as well. So the low cost is basically dictated by the low logistical distance. Yeah. And that will be an advantage that Ukraine will have basically forever. It's about geography, nothing else. And having that advantage, having this geography, and having closer relationship to the European Union, we definitely see as the right way for Ukraine to become such a supplier in all respects. That includes iron ore, that includes DRI pellets, that includes semi-finished steel and finished steel products. Perhaps even localization of some fabrication of steel products in Ukraine, which we discussed with some of our clients.
Okay, So I think we are coming to an end. We discussed many things. I hope you can stay for another few hours in the conference to see it. I know you have your company has a big stand, so everyone can go and get more information. I would like all you to please give a round of applause to Mr. Ryzenkov. And from me and from the team of Made in Steel, I would like to thank you for being here. We have decided this morning to give this floor, this stage to you because we thought looking beyond the future in Europe, Ukraine plays an important role, and it has been an honor to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Il futuro è una cosa che viene domani, dopodomani, dopodomani. Il futuro è una cosa che arriverà.
Quello che ci sarà domani.
Tutto ciò che deve ancora accadere.
Cosa c'è domani?
È come il passato, ma è diverso. Generazione che dai una cosa e poi quello che ha dato lo dà un'altra e fa così.
La mamma e il papà sono una generazione e io e mia sorella siamo un'altra generazione.
Che tutti siamo uguali. Ah, papi, queste sono domande importanti. Devo cercare di dire delle cose importanti.